On the broken moon of Viridia Prime, smoke hung thick in the air. The ground was cracked and blackened from fire. Buildings that once stood tall were now piles of rubble. The war between humans and the Xylosians had raged for years, but here, in this ruined city, it felt like the end of everything. Kaylin Vex lay half-buried under fallen stone and twisted metal. Her breathing was shallow, each breath a sharp pain in her chest. Blood, dark blue, not red, dripped slowly from her wounds. Her legs were gone, not just hurt. Gone. Torn away by a plasma blast during the ambush that wiped out her squad. She was a warrior of the Xylosian Hive Guard, one of the strongest fighters her people had ever known. Tall, with smooth gray skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light, eyes like polished obsidian, and long, sharp fingers built for both combat and delicate tasks. But now she was broken, useless according to Hive law. In Xylosian culture, a warrior who could no longer fight was left behind. No rescue, no mercy, just silence. Her commanders had seen her fall. They had paused for only a second, just long enough to confirm she was down before moving on. To them, she was already dead. And in truth, she might be soon. The cold was creeping into her bones. Her body heat was fading. Her mind drifted between pain and memory. She remembered her homeworld, green skies, singing winds, the soft hum of the hive's great halls. She remembered writing poems in the old tongue, verses about stars and peace, things warriors were not supposed to care about. That was why she'd been sent to the front lines, not just to fight but to be punished for questioning the war. Now, as the wind howled through the ruins, Kaylin closed her eyes. She did not beg for life. She only hoped her death would be quick. But fate had other plans. A few hundred meters away, Corporal Elias Rourke moved like a ghost through the wreckage. He was a human Marine, part of a small recon team sent to gather intel before the main evacuation. His armor was scratched, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. His rifle was slung over his shoulder, but his eyes were sharp, scanning every shadow. Rourke was tired. Not just from the mission, but from the war itself. He'd seen too many friends die, too many villages burned, too many orders that made no sense. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man trying to survive, and maybe, if he was lucky, do one good thing before it all ended. His squad had moved ahead, clearing a path to the extraction point. Rourke had stayed behind to check a collapsed building, just in case there were survivors. Human survivors, that was. He wasn't looking for Xylosians. In fact, he'd been taught to shoot them on sight. But then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a trick. A trap. Xylosians were cunning. They used decoys, ambushes, illusions. He raised his rifle, finger near the trigger. But something stopped him. She wasn't moving. Not like a predator waiting to strike. She was still. Too still, and the way she lay, half covered in dust, one arm stretched out like she'd been reaching for something, looked more like surrender than strategy. He crept closer, weapon ready. 10 meters, 5. Then he saw the blood, blue blood, and the missing legs. His stomach turned. This wasn't a soldier ready to fight. This was someone left to die. He lowered his rifle. "Hey," he said, voice rough. "Can you hear me?" No answer. Her chest rose and fell, barely. Rourke knelt beside her. He didn't touch her, not yet. He knew Xylosians had different biology. Touching her the wrong way could hurt her more. But he could see she was fading fast. Her skin was losing its faint glow. Her breathing was slowing. He looked around. No sign of enemy movement. His squad wouldn't wait forever. If he stayed too long, he'd be left behind too. He should walk away. That's what training said. That's what survival said. But something inside him, something deeper than orders, wouldn't let him. "Damn it," he muttered. He pulled his med kit from his belt. It was meant for humans, but it had basic clotting foam, pain blockers, and a thermal blanket. It might not work on her, but it was better than nothing. He sprayed the clotting foam on her wounds. To his surprise, it seemed to seal the bleeding. Then he wrapped the thermal blanket around her torso, careful not to jostle her. Her eyes fluttered open. They locked onto his. For a long moment, neither moved. Fear, pain, and something else, curiosity, passed between them. She didn't snarl. She didn't try to attack. She just watched him, as if trying to understand why a human would help her. "You're not supposed to be alive," Rourke said softly, more to himself than to her. She made a sound, low, vibrating, almost like a hum. It wasn't language he knew, but it didn't sound hostile. I'm Elias, he said. I'm not your enemy right now, she blinked slowly. Then, with great effort, she lifted a trembling hand and touched the edge of the thermal blanket. A gesture of thanks? Or just confusion? He didn't know. His radio crackled. Rourke, where the hell are you?
We're pulling out in 5.
I'm coming, he replied. But he didn't move. He looked at her again. If he left her, she'd die within hours. Maybe less. The cold would take her, or scavengers, or her own people if they returned and saw her as weak. He made a decision. He slid his arms under her carefully, avoiding her wounds. She gasped, a sharp clicking sound, but didn't fight him. She was lighter than he expected, her body lean and dense like carved stone. Hold on, he said, and then he lifted her. She was heavy enough to strain his back, but he managed. He adjusted her in his arms, cradling her like someone might carry a child. She rested her head against his shoulder, her breathing a little steadier now. He started walking, away from the evacuation point, deeper into the ruins. It was the opposite of what he should do. But the open ground near the LZ was too dangerous. Snipers, drones, patrols. He needed cover. He found a half-collapsed bunker behind a shattered wall. The entrance was blocked by rubble, but there was a narrow gap. He squeezed through, carrying her inside. The space was dark, damp, but hidden. He laid her down gently on a dry patch of floor. She shivered. He gave her the rest of his water, just a few sips, and checked her wounds again. The foam had held. That was good. Outside, the wind picked up. Distant explosions rumbled like thunder. Rourke sat beside her, rifle across his lap. He should call for help. But who would come for a Xylosian? No one. If Command found out he was helping her, they'd court-martial him. Maybe worse. But as he looked at her, her quiet strength, the way she hadn't given up even when left for dead, he knew he couldn't leave. You're stuck with me now, he said. She didn't answer, but her hand moved slightly, brushing against his boot. And for the first time in a long time, Rourke didn't feel alone in the war. Outside, the moon of Viridia Prime continued to burn. But in that dark bunker, something small and fragile began to grow. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of it. The bunker was cold and smelled of rust and old smoke. Rain began to fall outside, soft at first, then harder, drumming on the broken metal roof. Inside, Kaylin lay still, her breathing slow but steady. Elias sat against the wall, cleaning his rifle with a scrap of cloth. He kept glancing at her, half expecting her to vanish or attack. But she did neither. She just watched him with those deep, dark eyes. Hours passed. Night fell. The only light came from a small glow stick Elias had stuck in the corner. Kaylin's skin, which had once shimmered faintly, now looked dull. She was weak but alive. Elias broke the silence first. You thirsty? She didn't answer with words. Instead, she made a soft clicking sound and tilted her head slightly toward the water canteen near his boot. He handed it to her. She held it with both hands, her fingers long and thin, with 3 joints instead of 2, and drank slowly. Some of the water spilled down her chin, but she didn't seem to mind. Your people left you, Elias said, not as an accusation, but as a fact. Kaylin paused. Then she tapped her chest twice with 2 fingers, a gesture Elias didn't understand. But her eyes looked sad. Maybe that was her way of saying yes. He sighed. Mine wouldn't leave me, but I don't know if that's better or worse. They sat in silence again. Outside, the wind howled. Somewhere far off, a drone buzzed, then faded. The next morning, Elias knew they couldn't stay. The bunker wasn't safe for long. Enemy patrols swept this area every few hours, and his squad would assume he was dead or captured. No one would come looking. He needed to move. But he couldn't carry her forever without a plan. He found a broken metal sheet and some rope in the corner of the bunker. With careful hands, he tied the sheet to 2 long pieces of pipe he'd pulled from the rubble. It wasn't perfect, but it made a rough sled. He helped Kaylin onto it, wrapping her in the thermal blanket again. She winced as he moved her, but didn't cry out. Xylosians, he remembered from training, felt pain like humans, but they were taught to hide it. Warriors never showed weakness. Sorry, he said. She shook her head once. Then she pointed east with a shaky hand. Elias frowned. East, why? She made a series of low hums, then tapped the ground 3 times. He didn't understand the sounds, but the gesture felt like a map. Maybe she knew this place better than he did. He decided to trust her. They moved slowly through the ruins. Elias pulled the sled behind him, his boots crunching on broken glass and ash. Kaylin lay flat, eyes scanning the sky. Every few minutes she'd make a soft sound, a warning, and Elias would freeze. Once a patrol drone flew overhead. They pressed themselves into a ditch until it passed. By midday they found shelter in the shell of an old observatory. The dome was cracked, but the walls were thick. Inside, strange machines sat covered in dust. Star charts hung on the walls, faded but still beautiful. Elias set up a small camp near a broken console. He shared his last protein bar with Kaylin. She sniffed it first, then took a small bite. Her face twisted slightly, clearly not used to human food, but she ate it anyway. That night, as they sat by a dim heat lamp Elias had salvaged, something changed. Kaylin began to hum. It wasn't loud, just a low, steady vibration that filled the room like a soft song. The sound made the air feel warmer. Elias felt his shoulders relax for the first time in weeks. His hands stopped shaking. The nightmares that usually came at night seemed to fade. He looked at her. What was that? She placed a hand on her chest, then pointed to him. Then she hummed again, softer this time. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. This is for you. Later, he tried to talk to her properly. He pulled out his translator, a small device issued to all Marines for basic enemy communication. It was old and glitchy, but it might help. Can you speak into this? He asked, holding it out. Kaylin studied the device. Then carefully, she placed her mouth near it and made a series of clicks and hums. The translator flickered, then spat out broken words. Safe. Not enemy. Trust, Elias smiled. Yeah, I trust you too. Over the next few days, they built a strange kind of life together. Elias taught her simple human signs. Pointing to his eyes meant look. Tapping his ear meant listen. Holding up one finger meant wait. She learned fast. In return, she taught him bits of her own language. She showed him how to read Xylosian sky signs, how certain stars meant danger, others meant water nearby. She used her fingers to draw symbols in the dust, a circle for home, a broken line for war, two joined hands for together. They didn't need perfect words. They understood each other in silence, in gestures, in shared looks. One afternoon, while Elias was patching a tear in his coat, Kaylin reached out and touched his wrist. He froze. She pointed to a scar on his forearm, a jagged line from an old wound. He nodded. Got that in Sector 9, a kid threw a grenade. Not even 10 years old, she didn't look away. Her eyes held his, full of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Understanding. She placed her palm flat over his scar, then made a soft, rising hum. It wasn't magic, but it felt like healing. Elias swallowed hard. I didn't think you're kind. Cared about humans, Kaylin shook her head. Then she drew in the dust again. A Xylosian figure, a human figure standing side by side under one sun. They teach us you are monsters, she said slowly, the translator struggling with her voice. But yeah, you carry me. You share food. You stay. Elias looked down. I just couldn't leave you. She nodded as if she'd known that all along. As days turned into a week, they grew stronger. Elias found a hidden cache of old rations in the observatory, enough to last a few more days. Kaylin's wounds began to close, helped by her species' fast healing and the med kit Elias had used. She still couldn't walk, but she could sit up now and even help scout with her sharp eyes. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over the ruins, Elias asked, "Why were you fighting?" "Really?" Kaylin was quiet for a long time. Then she used the translator again, her voice slow and careful. "I wrote poems," she said, "about peace, about stars. The Hive said, weak, sent me here to die in battle." "On her death," Elias frowned. "They wanted you dead?" "Not dead," she corrected. "Forgotten." He thought about that. He'd seen officers send good soldiers on suicide missions just to get rid of them. War wasn't just about enemies. Sometimes it was about control. "I lost my whole platoon in a village," he said quietly. "We were told it was enemy-held. But it wasn't, just families. I couldn't stop it." Kaylin reached out and placed her hand over his. Her skin was cool, but her touch was warm. "No more war," she whispered through the translator. He looked at her. "How?" She pointed to the two of them. "Start here. They didn't have a plan." "No army, no ship. Just two wounded soldiers from opposite sides hiding in a broken world. But for the first time, Elias felt like maybe the war didn't have to win. The next morning, they prepared to move again. Elias had studied the maps Kaylin drew. There was a dry riverbed to the east, less patrolled, more cover. If they followed it far enough, they might reach the old coalition fallback zone. As he helped her onto the sled, she surprised him by gripping his arm tightly. "Elias," she said, using his name clearly for the first time. He looked at her. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, throat tight. "Don't thank me yet. We've got a long way to go." She smiled then, a small, quiet thing, but real. Her eyes sparkled faintly like they used to. And as they set off into the gray dawn, pulling the sled over cracked earth, they weren't just survivor and rescuer anymore. They were partners, maybe even friends. The war still raged around them, but in that moment, walking together through the ruins, they had built something the war couldn't touch. Trust, and that was enough to keep going. The dry riverbed stretched ahead like a scar in the land. Its banks were high, made of cracked red stone that gave good cover. Elias pulled the sled slowly, his boots sinking into the fine dust. Kaylin lay on the metal sheet, wrapped in the thermal blanket, her eyes scanning the ridges above them. Every sound made her tense. Birds, wind, even the creak of Elias's boots. They had been walking for 3 days. Food was almost gone. Water was low, but they kept moving. Stopping meant death. Kaylin's body was healing, but without legs she couldn't walk. Elias had tried to build crutches from broken pipes, but her balance was off and she fell hard the first time. After that, they stuck with the sled. It was slow but safe. On the 4th morning, a sandstorm hit. The sky turned orange, then black. Wind howled like a beast, throwing dust and sharp pebbles through the air. Elias quickly pulled Kaylin behind a large rock and covered them both with a tarp from his pack. They sat pressed together, breathing through cloth masks Elias had made from torn shirts. For hours, the storm raged. Sand piled up around them. Kaylin shivered, not from cold, but from fear. On her world, storms like this buried whole villages. She gripped Elias's arm tightly. "It's okay," he said, voice muffled by the mask. "We're safe here." She nodded, but her eyes stayed wide. When the storm finally passed, the world was changed. Dunes had moved. Landmarks were gone. Even the riverbed looked different. Elias checked his compass. It was broken, the sand had jammed it. He looked at Kaylin. "Which way now?" She studied the sky. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows. She pointed to a distant hill with a twisted metal tower on top. "There," she said through the translator. "Old signal station, safe." Elias trusted her. They moved on. That night they found a shallow cave in the hillside. Inside it was dry and quiet. Elias lit a small heat lamp. Not enough to show from outside, but enough to keep them warm. He shared the last of their water with Kaylin. She took only a few sips and pushed the canteen back to him. "You need it more," she said. He shook his head. "We both need it." She looked at him for a long time. Then she reached into a small pouch tied to her belt, something Elias hadn't noticed before. She pulled out a smooth blue seed. "Xylos root," she said. "Eat, gives strength." Elias hesitated. "Is it safe for humans?" She nodded. "My people traded with off-worlders before war. This helps all." He chewed the seed slowly. It tasted bitter, but within minutes his tired muscles felt lighter. His mind cleared. He looked at her with new respect. "You've been holding out on me," he said with a tired smile. She almost smiled back. The next day, they reached the signal station. It was half buried in sand, but the walls were strong. Inside, they found old supplies, rusted cans of food, a broken radio, and most importantly, a full water tank still sealed tight. Elias nearly cried when he opened it. They rested for 2 days. Elias cleaned their gear. Kaylin used pieces of wire and glass to make a small mirror, which she used to signal if danger came. She also began teaching Elias more of her language, not just words, but meanings. A low hum meant calm. A sharp click meant danger. A rising tone meant hope. In return, Elias taught her human songs, simple ones, like old marching tunes or lullabies his mother used to sing. At first, she just listened. Then one night she tried to sing along. Her voice was strange. More vibration than sound, but it was beautiful in its own way. They were no longer just surviving. They were learning each other. On the 7th day of their journey, they saw smoke on the horizon. Elias dropped to his knees, pulling Kalen behind a rock. He raised his binoculars. In the distance, a small village burned. Coalition soldiers moved through the streets, rounding up civilians. "They're clearing the zone," Elias whispered. "Getting ready to pull out for good." Kalen watched, her face hard. "My people did the same," she said. "Burn, take, leave nothing." Elias felt sick. He knew that order. Scorched earth. "They don't want the Xylosians to use this place. We must go around," Kalen said. But going around meant adding days to their trip. Days they didn't have. Elias's feet were blistered. Kalen's wounds were healing, but she needed real medicine soon. That night, as they camped in a dry well, Elias made a decision. "We're not going around," he said. "We're going through." Kalen stared at him. "Too dangerous." "Maybe," he said. "But if we wait, we'll die out here. And if we go back, they'll kill you. Going forward is the only chance." She was silent for a long time. Then she nodded. "Then we go fast, quiet, like shadows." The next morning they moved at dawn. Elias painted their faces with ash to hide their skin. He wrapped the sled in dark cloth to muffle sound. Kalen held a small knife Elias had given her, just in case. They slipped into the village at midday. Most of the soldiers were gone. Only a few guards remained, smoking near a burning house. Elias and Kalen moved like ghosts through the alleys, sticking to shadows, avoiding open spaces. But halfway through, a dog barked. It was a stray, thin and hungry, but its bark echoed off the walls. A guard turned. Elias froze. Kalen held her breath. The guard took a step forward, rifle raised. Then, from the other side of the street, a loud crash sounded, a roof collapsing. The guard turned toward the noise. Elias didn't wait. He grabbed the sled and ran, pulling Kalen through a broken gate and into an old stable. They hid there for an hour, hearts pounding. When it was safe, they kept going. By sunset, they were past the village. That night, under a sky full of stars, Elias finally let himself rest. He sat with his back against a rock, eyes closed. Kalen watched him. "You carry me," she said softly. "Why?" He opened his eyes. "Because no one else would." "But I am enemy." "You were," he said. "Now you're—" "Kalen." She looked down. "On my world, we say, a life saved is a life shared. You saved me. So my life is yours too." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. The next few days were harder. The land grew rocky. Water was scarce. But they pushed on. Kalen used her knowledge of desert plants to find moisture in roots. Elias used his training to avoid patrols and set traps for small animals, though neither of them liked eating them. One evening, as they sat by a tiny fire, Kalen began to hum again, the same lullaby from the observatory. Elias closed his eyes. The sound wrapped around him like a blanket. "Teach me that song," he said. She did. Slowly, note by note, hum by hum. He couldn't make the same sound she could, but he tried. She laughed, a soft clicking sound that surprised them both. It was the first time either of them had laughed in years. By the 10th day, they saw it. The edge of the Badlands. Beyond it lay the Coalition's last evacuation zone. Lights flickered in the distance. Ships moved in the sky, hope but also danger. The zone would be heavily guarded. And if they saw Kalen— "We'll wait until dark," Elias said. "Then I'll carry you the last stretch, no sled." "Too slow," Kalen agreed. As night fell, they made their final preparations. Elias checked his rifle, only 3 rounds left. He gave Kalen his sidearm, though she'd never used one. "Just in case," he said. They moved under cover of darkness. The ground was flat now, open. Every step felt like a risk, but they had come too far to turn back. Halfway to the perimeter, a spotlight swept the ground. Elias dropped flat, pulling Kalen into a ditch. The light passed over them, then a voice over a loudspeaker. "Halt! Identify yourself." Elias's blood ran cold. They'd been seen. He looked at Kalen. Her eyes were calm. She placed a hand on his arm. "Go," she whispered. "Save yourself." "No," he said firmly. "We go together." "Or not at all." He stood up slowly, hands raised. "Marine Corporal Elias Rourke. I have a wounded ally with me." Silence, then boots on gravel. Soldiers approached, rifles ready. One of them shined a light on Kalen. "Xylosian," the soldier shouted, raising his weapon. "Don't shoot," Elias yelled, stepping in front of her. "She's not a threat. She's hurt. She's with me." The soldiers hesitated. In that moment, under the cold light of Viridia's moons, Elias stood between his own people and the alien warrior he had sworn to protect. He didn't know if they would listen. He didn't know if they would believe him. But he stood his ground, because after everything, the ruins, the storm, the silence, the songs, he knew one thing for sure. He would not leave her again. The soldiers didn't shoot, but they didn't lower their weapons either. One of them stepped forward, a sergeant with a scar across his cheek and tired eyes. He looked at Elias, then at Kalen, then back at Elias. "Rourke," the sergeant said. "We thought you were dead." "I almost was," Elias said, still standing in front of Kalen. "But I'm not. And she's not your enemy right now." The sergeant frowned. "That's a Xylosian warrior. Hive Guard, you know what they've done." "I know what she's done," Elias said. "She saved my life more than once. And I'm not leaving her." A murmur went through the squad. Some looked angry, others confused. One young private kept staring at Kalen like she was a ghost. The sergeant sighed. "Orders are clear. All Xylosians are to be detained or eliminated. No exceptions." "She's wounded," Elias said. "She can't even walk. She's not a threat." "That's not for you to decide," the sergeant said. He nodded to two soldiers. "Take her." They moved forward. Elias stepped back, blocking them. "Touch her and you'll have to go through me." The tension snapped tight. Rifles shifted. Fingers hovered near triggers. Then Kalen spoke. Her voice was weak but clear. She used the translator Elias had kept charged all this time. "I come in peace." The soldiers froze. The sergeant blinked. "It talks?" "She's not an it," Elias said sharply. "Her name is Kalen." Kalen lifted her head. Her dark eyes held the sergeant's. "I do not want war," she said through the device. "I want to stop it." The sergeant didn't answer right away. He looked at his radio, then at the sky. The evacuation ships were still loading. Time was running out. "Fine," he said finally. "But she's not coming on the ship. Command will decide what to do with her. And you, Rourke, you're under arrest until they sort this out." Elias didn't argue. He knew it was the best he could get. As long as Kalen wasn't shot on sight, there was hope. They were taken to a medical tent near the edge of the zone. Kalen was placed on a cot, guarded by two armed soldiers. Elias was put in a holding cage nearby, just a chain-link box with a bench. He could see her through the wire. For 2 days, nothing happened. Food was brought. Water too, but no answers. On the third morning, a transport arrived. Not a troop carrier, a black armored van with no markings. Men in plain uniform stepped out. They weren't soldiers. They were from intelligence. They took Kalen first. Elias shouted, pounded on the fence, but no one listened. Then they came for him. He was driven to a command bunker deep inside the base. The room was cold, white, and empty except for a table and 2 chairs. A woman in a dark uniform sat waiting. Her name tag read Colonel Vance. She didn't smile. "Corporal Rourke, do you have any idea what you've done?" "I saved a life," he said. "You broke every rule," she snapped. "You aided the enemy. You disobeyed direct orders. You risked the safety of this entire operation." "She's not the enemy," he said. "Not anymore." Colonel Vance leaned forward. "She's Hive Guard. She's killed hundreds of our people." "Maybe," Elias said. "But she also carried me through a sandstorm when I was half dead. She shared her last food. She sang to me when I couldn't sleep. If that's the enemy, then maybe we've been fighting the wrong war." The colonel stared at him. Then she turned on a screen. It showed footage, grainy, shaky, but clear enough. It was Elias dragging Kalen through the ruins, then later sharing water, then sitting with her under the stars. "Where did this come from?" Elias asked. "A drone," she said. Civilian news picked it up. Now it's everywhere. "Marine saves Xylosian warrior. People are calling you a hero. Others are calling you a traitor." Elias didn't know what to say. "The public is divided," the colonel continued. "Protests are happening on Earth, Mars, even Luna. Some say we should talk peace. Others say we should execute her and you." Elias's stomach dropped. "You wouldn't. We might," she said coldly. "But High Command is nervous. The war is costing too much. Morale is low, and now, this," she gestured to the screen. "You've given them a problem they can't ignore." She stood up and walked to the door. "Kalen is in containment. Medical team says she'll live, but without proper prosthetics, she'll never walk again. We could give her that, or we could lock her away forever." She turned back. There's a third option. But it's risky. What is it? Elias asked. Peace talks, she said. Real ones. Not just empty words. The Xylosian High Hive has been silent for months, but they've seen the footage too. They know one of their own is alive. And with a human. Elias's heart beat faster. What do you need from me? Nothing, she said. But from her, everything. She must agree to speak for her people. To prove that not all Xylosians want endless war. And you'll be her witness, her protector. If she says yes, you both go into exile. No medals, no return to service. Just silence. And a chance. Elias thought of Kaylin, her quiet strength, her poems, her lullaby. He thought of the war that had taken everything from both of them. When can I see her? He asked. Now, the colonel said. They took him to a secure room. Kaylin sat on a bed wearing a plain gray suit. Her hands were free. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. When she saw Elias, she stood as best she could, using the wall for support. You came back, she said. I told you I would, he said. They sat together. He told her everything, the footage, the protests, the offer. Kaylin was quiet for a long time. Then she said, My people will call me traitor. Mine already do, Elias said. She looked at her hands. But if I say no, the war goes on. More die. More children throw grenades. More poets are sent to die. Yes, he said. She took a deep breath. Then I say yes. The next day, a small ship left Viridia Prime, not a warship, not a prison transport, just a quiet vessel with no flags, no weapons, heading for a neutral station in deep space. On board were 2 passengers, a human marine with no rank, and a Xylosian warrior with no legs, but both with something new. A voice. Back on Earth, the footage kept spreading. A school in Nairobi painted a mural of Elias carrying Kaylin. A musician in Tokyo wrote a song about the warrior and the marine. Even soldiers began to question quietly if the enemy was really so different. The war didn't end that day. But something shifted. A crack appeared in the wall of hate. And through it, light began to show. In the ship's small cabin, Kaylin looked out the window at the stars. Elias sat beside her. Do you think it will work? She asked. I don't know, he said. But we have to try. She reached for his hand. He took it. Outside, the stars burned, cold, distant, but full of possibility. And for the first time in years, both of them believed that maybe, just maybe, peace wasn't a dream. It was a choice. And they had already made it. 5 years had passed since the war ended. The stars still shone the same. But the galaxy felt different now. Quieter, softer, like a storm had finally passed. On the orbital station called Haven 7, floating far from any planet, a crowd gathered in the main council chamber. Humans, Xylosians, and delegates from a dozen other worlds sat in a wide circle. At the center stood Kaylin Vex. She was no longer the broken warrior left for dead in the ruins of Viridia Prime. She stood tall on sleek, silver legs, biomechanical prosthetics built by human engineers and tuned by Xylosian healers. They moved with grace, almost like her old limbs, but stronger. Her gray skin glowed faintly again, and her eyes held the calm of someone who had seen the worst and chosen better. Beside her, leaning against a wall with arms crossed, stood Elias Rourke. His hair was shorter, his face lined with age, but his eyes were steady. He wore no uniform now, just a simple gray jacket with a small pin. 2 hands joined, one human, one Xylosian. He was not a soldier anymore. He was her aide, her friend, and sometimes her voice when the translators failed. Kaylin stepped forward. The room fell silent. She did not speak through a machine this time. After years of work, she had learned human speech, slow, careful, but clear, and humans had learned to listen. I stand here not as a warrior, she began, but as a witness. She paused, letting the words sink in. I was taught that humans were monsters, that your hearts were cold, your hands cruel. I believed it. Until a man named Elias Rourke found me in the dirt, bleeding, legless, and left for dead. He did not shoot me. He did not leave me. He carried me. A murmur moved through the room. Some Xylosians looked down. Some humans wiped their eyes. He showed me that kindness is not weakness, Kaylin continued. That mercy is not surrender. And that peace is not a gift. It is a choice we make every day. She turned slightly and looked at Elias. He gave her a small nod. Because of that choice, she said, we have schools now where human and Xylosian children learn together. We have farms on Viridia Prime growing food for both our peoples. We have doctors sharing cures, engineers building ships that carry no weapons, poets writing in 2 tongues. She raised her hand, and a screen behind her lit up. It showed images, a Xylosian child holding a human child's hand. A joint research lab on Mars. The first human Xylosian colony on the green moon of Lyra 9. This is not the end of fear, Kaylin said. Fear will always come. But now we face it together. When she finished, the room did not erupt in cheers. Instead, there was a long silence, deep, respectful, full of understanding. Then slowly one delegate stood, then another. Soon the whole chamber was on its feet. Elias stayed where he was, watching her. Pride warmed his chest, but so did sadness. He remembered the cold bunker, the sandstorm, the moment he almost left her. He never imagined it would lead to this. After the meeting, they walked together through the station's garden, a place filled with earth flowers and Xylosian sky vines that glowed at night. You were good up there, Elias said. Kaylin smiled. You taught me to speak with more than words. They sat on a bench under a soft light. Below them, through the clear floor, they could see the colony ship New Dawn preparing to leave for Lyra 9. Families boarded, human and Xylosian side by side. Do you ever miss fighting? Elias asked quietly. Kaylin looked at her prosthetic legs. I miss the strength I had. But not the war. War takes everything. Even the things you didn't know you had, like hope. Elias nodded. I used to dream about battles. Now I dream about quiet mornings. Coffee. Your humming. She laughed softly, the same clicking laugh he'd first heard in the ruins. Later that evening, in their shared quarters, Kaylin sat by the window. Elias made tea, real earth tea, a rare gift from an old friend. She began to hum. The same lullaby from the observatory, from the desert, from the darkest nights. Elias sat beside her. He didn't say anything. He just listened. After a while, she signed with her hands, the simple signs they'd made up long ago. You're not alone, he signed back. Never again. Outside, the stars burned. But here, in this small room, there was warmth. There was peace. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Their story had spread far. Children read about them in school books. Artists painted them. Elders told their tale as a lesson. That even in the worst times, one act of kindness can change everything. Kaylin never became a queen or a general. Elias never got a medal or a statue, but they didn't need those things. They had something rarer, trust that lasted, friendship that grew, and a quiet belief that even enemies can become something more. Sometimes, late at night, Kaylin would write poems again, now in both languages. One of them hung on their wall. We were fire and stone, enemies in a broken sky, but you reached for my hand and I reached back. And from that touch, a new world began. Years later, when the first child born on Lyra 9 took her first steps, her skin a soft blend of gray and brown, her eyes holding both stars and earth, Elias and Kaylin stood together to watch. No one called them hero or traitor anymore. They were simply Elias and Kaylin, two souls who refused to let war be the final word. And in that moment, as the child laughed under twin suns, they knew their long walk through the ruins had been worth it, because peace was not just the end of fighting. It was the beginning of something new. And they had helped build it, one step, one word, one heartbeat at a time.